All right. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's good to be here. I've been on the TriLUG mailing list for years, but I've never presented before, so it's a pretty cool opportunity. So I'm going to be talking tonight about how I open sourced my phone. I'm going to talk about why I did that and how I did that, and maybe talk about why you might consider doing something similar. I have an asterisk on my title, as you may see. The small print is that there's no open hardware for phones that I know of, so it's not completely open source. There's still drivers and binary firmware blobs. I would love to get rid of that, but we're not there yet as human beings. I guess I already told you that. So I'm going to spend some time talking first about why I did this. The history starts with kind of long ago. I've been using Linux for about 15 years. I guess long is a relative term, but for me that seems long. And I've been using Linux exclusively since about 2004, so about 11 years of exclusive Linux desktop use. And I've only had a smartphone for probably 4 or 5 or 6 years, I'm not sure. But during the time of having a smartphone, I started realizing that my desktop was very nice, and my phone had all these sort of, who's writing the software, and where's it coming from, and what is it doing? And there's no way to find out what your software is doing on your phone. It's no way to fix it, no way to look in there, no way to study it, because it's all closed source. And we've seen this happen in the desktop world. We went from the 80s where the IBM PC and everything was closed source to Linux coming out and revolutionizing it. And I think that we're going to see that same thing happen with phones, but they're a little bit behind. So I've been using my phone like that for years, and the last year or two, we've seen all these headlines come out about the NSA's activities with Prism and getting inside Google and reading all of our data that we keep there. And that really concerns me. And if you rely on those services, there's nothing you can do about that. And so I started thinking about a year and a half ago about an escape plan for myself to get free from Google. I had not been using Google's Gmail services. I've been hosting my own mail for years. But I had been using Google for many other things. I had used their Docs product. I had used their calendar. I had been I actually been storing my contacts there. I had a Google Voice phone number, and many other things. And so I started thinking about a year and a half ago, what can I do? Just about a year ago from this month, I started doing it. So what I'm going to be showing you tonight is what I did to get away from Google. It's not going to be particularly technical. As Jack pointed out, or I mentioned, there will be the Hack Night next week, or did you call it Hack Night? Yeah. Hack Night next week, where we can look at how do you flash other firmware in your phone, because I do use alternate firmware. So mostly tonight I'm going to be doing a very high-level overview that should be interesting to a more general audience. It's not particularly technical. But I want to ask for you to internally consider what your motivation for being here is. All of us are here at TriLUG, right? It's a Linux users group. And it's important to recognize that everyone in this room comes to open source for different reasons. Some of us are open source fanatics like myself. I'm a little bit crazy. Maybe a lot crazy. But I recognize not everyone here shares the full feeling that I have for open source. Some people use it because it's their job. Some people use it only at their job. So these are some reasons I thought of why open source is really awesome. Privacy is one of my biggest concerns, especially given NSA spying. I think open source software is very important for privacy. It's important to be able to study the software and make sure that it's not backdoored. And having a lot of people being able to see the source code is very important for that. But I think there's a lot of other great benefits. That's my personal reason for being here. But collaboration is awesome too. I don't know how many of you use GitHub, but I'm on GitHub all day, every day. And it is excellent to work with strangers across the globe and make something together. It's a really nice feeling. And of course, open source also allows us to modify software. In fact, just today I was working on Celery, the Python project. It doesn't do something that I want it to do, and I'm able to make it do That would not be possible with Gmail. The freedom to distribute is obviously very nice. So inspection and security are similar for privacy, that because there's many eyes on the code, we can all have some better feeling about the safety of it. So yeah, these are, and you may have other reasons for coming. We'll have a Q&A at the end, so if you have another reason to use open source, I'd love to hear it. So when I started thinking a year and a half ago about how I was going to escape the clutches of non-free software, I decided to make a list of what can I do with my phone now that I want to continue to be able to do. And it is true that I can't do everything that I used to be able to do, so I was trying to hit the big things. And this is a list of things that I came up with that were important to me personally. Cryptography is very important to me. I do a lot with GPG, so I wanted to make sure I could do that. Obviously, I want to be able to encrypt the phone itself, so if it gets stolen or lost. I use one-time password software, so I need a solution for that. I use a password database, and we'll talk about that in a second, but I wanted to be able to synchronize my password database with my phone and my computer so I can use unique passwords on every site and feel good about that. Obviously, email and chat are nice. Media for music and camera. And then Google Maps was something I found myself using a whole lot on my phone, so I need a solution for that. Web browser, AOSP actually comes with a web browser, but I don't use that one. Sharing as I mentioned earlier, I use Google Calendar and Google Contacts, so I need to replace that. For Google Drive, I needed to be able to sync files. I used to use Google Reader, which I'm sure a lot of you used, and they're very sad that that's gone. So I needed a replacement for that. And lastly, it would be nice if the phone had desktop integration with my Linux desktop. That's a big list. And oh yeah, you want to be able to make phone calls too, yeah. Although you're like, you have a phone call, I was like, a phone call for me right now? Yes, I didn't mention that. But yes, the phone should be able to make phone calls too, and get on, and to the same point though, it should be able to get on the data network. Goes without saying. I wanted to make a point right now that you may be thinking in your head that there's something that you'd put on this list that you don't see, and there may or may not be a solution for that. And if there isn't, I would like to hear that in the end too. But it's important when you want to do things like this to think about during the migration, what am I going to gain and what am I going to lose? And it's true that I did lose some things, but I gained a whole lot. The next several slides, I'm going to start talking about that list in greater detail and what specific apps I used to accomplish each piece. And one thing that's important to note is that you can't do what I did without leaving Google. If you care about the privacy, if that's your particular concern, which it was for me. So in my case, I needed to host a whole lot of things myself with the server. So I decided to do a bizarre mixture of CentOS, Fedora, and Gentoo. The Gentoo is the bizarre part. I actually do use Gentoo in production, and I've had a lot of fun with that, where fun equals compiling downtime. So that's my server. So on my phone, my client, I'm going to call that the client for the slide for some reason because we know that word. I use CyanogenMod, which is a popular ROM. You've probably heard of it. And there is an app called F-Droid that does not ship with CyanogenMod, but you can sideload it, that is an open source app store. F-Droid is really great. I hang out with them on Freenode a whole lot. They do not allow the app authors to upload binaries. They only build from source. So like many distros, they download the source code and they build it themselves, and they publish that. So they make a guarantee that the build you're getting is made by them from the source code. So obviously you have to trust them, but that's true for any Linux distribution. So this is a screenshot of what F-Droid looks like. It's a little small, I know. But it's not the most beautiful app, but it does have a lot of useful things in it. I wanted to talk a little bit about CyanogenMod itself too. It is built on AOSP, and it integrates a lot of really cool patches that people around the internet have made. I'm not exactly sure what their process is, but I think they just find like, oh, that patch is cool, we'll accept it, and we bring it in. And they take AOSP and they build on all of these extra features. A lot of them are small things that are hard to remember. I notice mostly when I use other people's phones that, oh, you don't have CyanogenMod, so you can't do this really cool thing that I take for granted all the time because I'm used to it. But I wrote down a small list that I can remember that's different. I think the biggest thing that it has for me is it has the ability to limit app permissions. So if you're an Android user, you may be familiar with installing an app, and it's, I want to be able to see your GPS location, and I want to be able to see all your friends and everything you've ever said on SMS, so I can upload it onto a server for the essay to study. And that's very concerning. So CyanogenMod has this really great feature where you can accept those app permissions, but then lock them down anyway. And I'm pretty sure it's just lying to the app. So the app asks where your location is, and it's like, you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or something. Or I have no friends, there's no contacts. And it's very nice. You can lock it down per app. So there's a nice little settings menu, and you can go in there and say, oh, Facebook, you're not allowed to see contacts or my location, but you are allowed to use the camera. Or you can kind of make the decision for yourself. And it has a nice setting where by default, you can configure it to, by default, lock everything down and only allow what you want. So for me, that's the biggest win with CyanogenMod. But it has a lot of nice things. Like it has a pretty sweet keyboard that's got nice little like long press things that have a lot more options. It has quiet hours, which my wife enjoys. She doesn't like when my phone makes sounds in the middle of the night, which I don't notice. Lots of little things, like has a built-in flashlight, has themes and profiles, lots of really, like I said, they're all small things. It's not a lot of big things, but it's cool. Okay. So moving along, I'm going to, the next few slides is going to sort of talk about a category of apps, and then I'm just going to share the apps I use and why I like them and why I dislike them. Because they're not all, it's not all roses. So security, as I said, is a big deal to me. This screenshot right here is for the Open Keychain app, which is a very nice PGP/GPG app. This is my PGP key here, so if you guys want to sign that you know me, you can actually use that QR code. This app is really cool. You can, if you go to like a GPG key signing party, like we might do here, you can share your GPG key with NFC or with that QR code, and it makes it really easy to kind of, hey, let's share keys, and you just hold it up, and it works. But you can sign keys with the app. You can do all kinds of stuff. You're getting lots of QR codes. So the other thing that's really nice about this app, though, is it doesn't just do key signing or just key sharing. It also does GPG. And it integrates with a few other apps that we'll talk about in a second, but it integrates with my email app and my chat app so that I'm able to encrypt and sign mails to people that I know, just like you can in your Linux desktop. And also, it's a very attractive looking app. I think it's really nice. It's very simple. It doesn't do a lot, but it does what it does very easily and well. And, it works great. Some of the other apps I'm going to talk about here, CryptoFS Password is really great. I never use it though. In fact, I think I've only ever used it once. If you use Android encryption where you encrypt its disk, there's one very terrible thing about that. You have to choose between a good password, which forces your unlock screen to be a long password that you're typing, which is annoying, or you have to choose a weak PIN so that your lock screen PIN is easy to type, but then it's easy to break your encryption. So CryptoFS Password is an app that does require root, but it lets you change the password to decrypt the phone separately of the unlock screen password. So that's nice because I have a very complicated password for decrypting my phone, which I only have to do when I boot. But then when I check my email, I don't have to type this crazy password out. So that's a really important app, and the reason I've only ever used it once is I've only ever set that password one time, and that's it. So it worked really well the one time I used it. let's see. Oh, KeyPassDroid. How many of you use KeyPassX or any sort of? Oh, that's good. KeyPassX is great, and KeyPassDroid is an Android client that can work with the KeyPass database. It can read and write it. It works pretty well, and I use it. I mentioned OwnCloud down here, and I'm going to talk about OwnCloud a whole lot tonight. I actually use OwnCloud to sync my KeyPass database to my phone so that it stays up to date with all my latest passwords. And lastly, I use free OTP. This is a replacement for Google Authenticator, if you're familiar with that. Google Authenticator used to be open source and then mysteriously became closed source with no new features. Is that suspicious? I don't know. I feel like that's suspicious. Free OTP is actually created by Red Hat. It's made by the Free IPA team, so if you're familiar with that product, it's very nice. And they made this to basically have a phone and one-time password story to go along with Free IPA. It actually does have a few features that are missing from Google Authenticator. I think you can relabel the passwords, and you can sort them differently, I think it does two things that you can't do with Google Authenticator. And it's open source, so you can make sure it's not backdoored. So those are the apps that I use for security. And I mentioned OwnCloud here. How many people are familiar with OwnCloud? OwnCloud is unfortunately written in PHP. Sorry if you're a PHP developer. It is written in PHP, and that to me is a downside. But it's a very, very nice piece of software if you can get over that. Because it does, at its core, it's basically a Dropbox replacement. But it does quite a lot more than that. It can also do CalDAV for your calendar, and it can do CardDAV to share your contacts. It's plugin oriented, so there's a whole lot of apps that do many things. You'll see that on a ton of my slides tonight, because it's actually really central to keeping my data in sync. And on this slide, it's because I want my KeyPass database to be synced. Okay, so email is important to me. These are screenshots from two programs that I use for email and chat. On the left here, it's that app is called K9 Mail. You may be familiar with it. I believe it was originally a fork of the AOSP email app, the one with the little yellow that they got rid of. I think they forked years ago and have since added so many features. It's much, much better than that app. It integrates with the GPG app I showed you earlier. So if you notice, it has a little sign and encrypt checkboxes. That's very nice because I can use my phone with K9 and I can sign all the mails I write just like I do on my desktop, and I can encrypt to people. On the right there, we see a XMPP app called Conversations. Conversations is a very attractive app. It's, as you can see, it's beautiful. And if you notice on the bottom, it's actually prompting me to send an open PGP encrypted message. So it also integrates with the GPG app.
That's useful when you're typing your password to your buddy.
That's right. Yeah, you want to make sure when you send someone your password that ends up being asterisks. You wouldn't want them to see your password as Hunter2. Yeah. So. And for this, the server side, the first three are basically how I do email. I just use Postfix, Dove, Cod, and Spam Assassin, which is a pretty popular combination. And then the Jabber server is for the chatting. So yeah, this is a nice replacement for Gmail and Google Hangouts.
Which Jabber server?
That's the one thing I do not host it myself. I use WTF as my IP.com. So that's kind of funny. But the postfix and stuff I host myself. I mostly just haven't gotten around to that. So media. I don't use the phone camera too much, but when I do, I like it to be Dos Equis. I really just use the stock one that comes with CyanogenMod, which I think is just unmodified AOSP. It may actually be slightly modified, I'm not sure. And again, you see OwnCloud here. So OwnCloud has an Android app that can notice when you take pictures and automatically upload them into OwnCloud, which is very nice. And this is something that Google had with their camera and Google Plus, so that your pictures are instantly backed up, essentially. And I think that's a really great feature, and I wanted to keep that. And it turns out that OwnCloud just did that. So I didn't even have to really do much besides install OwnCloud. So every picture I take ends up on my server and backed up with my offsite backups. It's very nice. The two screenshots here are actually Subsonic on the right, which is a music server, and on the left there's an Android app called DSub that connects to it. This is a good replacement for Google Music if you use that. Subsonic is kind of another love-hate thing. It is written in Java, and it has probably one of the worst web sites I've ever seen. Like, it's just really, really crazy. I could probably write a whole paper about how bad it is. But it's actually, the reason I chose it was it seemed like the best of a bunch of bad choices. However, it actually works really well. It's just sort of ugly and weird, and it has a lot of gotchas that you eventually learn to work around. But I stream music from my house to my phone all the time as I drive around the car, and it works really well. The Android app I can actually say a lot of really good things for. It's very beautiful, very intuitive, easy to use, no nonsense. And one of my favorite features that Subsonic and DSub have is it can shuffle albums, not just tracks. And I love that because I can say, hey, give me a view of a bunch of albums, and it just shows you 10 or 20 albums, and then you can pick one. And a lot of times I don't know what I want to listen to, so I just click that button, and it gives me options, and you can refresh. So that's a nice little side feature. So by scientific observation, we have encountered no known magnetic monopoles. The gradient of the magnetic field is 0, unlike what we see written of the electric field above. Oh, how did that slide get? My wife said that she thought that it was funnier that I thought that would be funny than how funny it is. It's true. Some more, this is sort of routine stuff that's not so sexy or exciting, but I wanted to be able to synchronize a lot of data. This is mostly what you want to do with your phone. So OwnCloud is really strong in this slide. OwnCloud is really great. It syncs, as I said, there's an OwnCloud Android app, and I can sync my files between my phone and my computers. But it's also what synchronizes my calendar, so it actually integrates with the AOSP calendar app. So the native, if you use Android, the native calendar app you're used to seeing, that calendar doesn't have to be stored in Google. It can be stored elsewhere. And all you need is a CalDAV server, which OwnCloud can do. There are many other options as well. Similarly for contacts, the AOSP contacts, those don't have to be stored in Google. They can be stored somewhere else. And there's a protocol called CardDAV to do that. And OwnCloud does that as well. This app DAVdroid is actually how I sync the calendar and contacts between OwnCloud and Android, because the OwnCloud app confusingly does not do that. Yeah, that is weird. I was expecting it to, but the OwnCloud app only does the file stuff. It does the file and the camera stuff, but it doesn't do calendaring or contacts. So DAVdroid is your friend it's sort of a background process that just keeps that stuff together. So when I add a calendar in my computer, it shows up in my phone or vice versa. And there's one more app, OwnCloud Newsreader. That's the one I have screenshotted here. It's a good replacement for Google Reader if you haven't found one yet. There's plenty of apps in that space, but since I'm already using OwnCloud, I like this because it's one less thing to deploy. It works really well. You just give it some RSS feeds, and I love the Onion, as you can see. I will probably end up working there one day. But I really want to be a writer for them, I think, even though I can't write at all. Yeah, it's a great app. One caveat I want to point out that's a struggle here is the calendar app in Android. If you create an event and invite somebody to the event and you click save, it will pop up a little overlay saying invitations have been sent, but it's a lie. No invitations are sent. And this has driven me crazy to no end. And I want to be honest tonight about like sort of the problems that I've had, because it's like I said, it's not all perfect. This is one area that I think is seriously broken, and I've been looking for a fix. It seems that the calendar app in Android assumes that you're using Google Calendar, and I think Google has the calendar server side generating email, and OwnCloud as a CalDAV server assumes that the client will generate the email. So everyone's making assumptions, and nobody sends the email as a result. And this actually is a serious limitation, I think. It's hard to use your phone and invite someone to an event. So what I tend to do is try to do on my calendar inviting from my desktop computer, which isn't really great. So I've actually been talking to the DAVdroid guy. He doesn't use IRC, it seems. He likes Twitter. So I've been sending him 140 character messages about complicated things. He told me if I write a patch, he'll accept it. But then I realized I'll be writing Java, and I haven't gotten to that yet. So the last slide is sort of miscellaneous items. These things are hard to relate to each other, so they're not necessarily connected. For a web browser, I use Firefox. Their app is in F-Droid as well. Firefox is a pretty good browser. It does seem to crash a lot in Android compared to the desktop version. But it's really great. And I think one of the best things about Firefox, especially over Chrome, is that it has support for extensions, which Chrome lacks. And there are privacy extensions you can install, like Ghostery and AdBlock. And I think that having that experience on the mobile is very important. And it has another benefit of if you enable Ghostery, which Ghostery, if you're not familiar, will block a bunch of tracking websites. Your mobile experience is so much faster when you're not reporting to Google every move.
I would avoid using Ghostery. It in itself is a tracker and does sell your data. That's in the Google for them.
Yeah, I've seen that. There is a checkbox that they have for whether you agree to that.
But the EFF.
Yes.
Privacy Badger, and
yes.
that one is open source, I believe.
It is, yeah, that is open source, but unfortunately it does not work in Firefox Mobile yet. But I do use that on my desktop. That's the one, yeah. So you can use Ghostery, but another thing that's actually worth knowing is Firefox itself has a built-in privacy tracking disabler. Is that the word? It involves typing about config and dealing with crazy database stuff. But if you're technical enough to do that, there is a setting, I should have written it on here, called tracking protection, privacy.tracking protection. And so if you type about config, this actually works on your desktop version as well. You can actually tell Firefox to refuse to talk to all of those trackers. So that's really nice. And the mobile version also supports this. So for maps, I have a screenshot here on the right of the Maps app I use. This is called OSM, and OSM stands for OpenStreetMap. Anyone familiar with OpenStreetMap? Oh, awesome. OpenStreetMap is fantastic. It's not just open source, it's open data, and what's better than open source and open data. If you've used the Android app before, I'm going to just admit that it's not the easiest to use app. Although they recently redid the UI, and it's much better than it used to be. I still find it to be a pretty steep learning curve. A lot of the icons are not very intuitive. Things are hidden away. You never know what you're supposed to click on to do what you want to do. However, with all those negatives, it has a whole lot of positives too. And I think one of the best things is that it can work entirely offline. It downloads the open data to your phone, and you can be completely disconnected and still navigate, and you can still see great detail on all the objects. They tend to divide the United States up by states, so you download the states that you want to visit. It's pretty good once you learn how to use it. So it does have that learning curve. So if you need to know how to get to Area 51, that's it there. If you can figure out how to get in there and back out without interacting with anyone, I'd love to hear about that. Another app that I use is OSM Tracker, which actually sounds pretty scary because of the word tracker. OSM Tracker is a nice little utility for helping you edit OpenStreetMap. I've recently gotten into map editing. So it lets you sort of walk around and collect GPS traces, and as you walk around, you can add little text notes or voice notes or photographs to your tracks, and then it can upload them to OpenStreetMap for you, and you can use their nice web interface to make the edits on the map that you took notes about. And I actually just did this week to map the houses in my neighborhood. One of the problems with OpenStreetMap is that the road data seems to be pretty good, but a lot of times building data is not available yet. So it's often difficult to navigate to a specific address or to find a cookout. I saw a cookout in Durham that wasn't on there the other day, so I added it. I did my civic duty. You can have 40 milkshakes with OpenStreetMap. So I would encourage you all to try this app out and to help make the map. And the last app I want to talk about is a little tiny one called KDE Connect. You're probably thinking, oh, I don't use KDE. But if you do use KDE, it's very nice. I use KDE at home. It basically synchronizes your notifications on your desktop with your phone. So if my phone's upstairs and I'm downstairs on my computer and I get a text message, my computer will say, oh, you have a text message. And that's really nice. If you're familiar with Pushbowl, it's kind of similar to that. I believe it can transfer files, though I don't use that because I use OpenFile.
With the notifications, does it use something KDE specific, or is it like bus notifications?
I think the display of notification, I think, is probably Live Notify, but the app itself is very KDE specific. Like there's a KDE app that does this. I do believe that there's a GNOME alternative, but I've not tried that. One other really crazy thing it can do that I don't even know why, but they added it to the same app, which makes no sense to me. It can also turn your phone into a touchpad for your computer. So if you have an old phone you've been wondering what to do with, you can make it a touchpad for your computer. It's just weird to me that it's like the same app as the thing that does notifications because it seems so unrelated, but it does that too. So I've shared with you a whole lot of apps just now, which is a big list. And I wanted to mention that this is just what I've done. There are a whole lot of options out there. It's pretty obvious that you don't have to use Gentoo as your server, so you have lots of alternatives there. But in addition, there are other Android ROMs that you can use, like CyanogenMod, other than CyanogenMod. I actually can't even name any because that's the only one I've ever used, but I know that there are other ones that exist. And many of them are popular as well. Replicant is an interesting one. I wouldn't recommend using it yet, but their goal is to be purely open source. Like they're trying to get rid of all the binary blobs and driver problems. I went last night and looked at the phones they support. It's a very short list, and there were several columns that said supported no the whole way down. So that's why I would not recommend using it. They definitely seem like very early alpha, but it's an interesting project to keep your eye on and maybe even help contribute to. Last fall, I have an old phone, as probably a lot of us do, and I tried out Firefox OS last fall on it. It was an old Galaxy Nexus. Firefox OS is pretty cool, made by Mozilla. It was pretty slow on my Galaxy Nexus, but then again, it was a Galaxy Nexus, which is as slow as can be with anything on it. But it was pretty cool. I tried it out for a while. It seemed a little unstable, but I enjoyed it, and I'm very excited about that project. I also saw recently that you can actually buy an Ubuntu phone. I thought for the longest time that was vaporware, but they actually do sell a handset right now. They don't ship it here, so if you happen to live in Europe and are visiting, you can buy it when you go back home. Yeah. I think this is very exciting because, for me, the phone is like the PC in the early 90s, or maybe a little bit later than that. It's so closed source and everything's so proprietary, and people are just starting to sort of create alternatives for you. And I'm really glad to see that someone's stepping up to compete with Google and Apple as well with these other options. So that's cool. So, as I said, this is sort of my story of how and why I went away from using Google. I've found that being free of spying feels really good. I have a lot more confidence in what I do with my data, and I actually spend a lot more time thinking about where I'm typing data into now than I used to, and that's been a very positive change for me, I think. I can't do everything I used to be able to do. There aren't a whole lot of games in F-Droid. There are a few, though. So it may not be right for you to go completely open source with your phone, but maybe you saw an app today that you want to try. And even if you go one app, exchange one closed source app for one open source app, I think that's a win. So I would encourage you to consider what you're using your phone for and how you can be more free with your data. Maybe switch from something closed source to something open source. It's one step at a time, unless you're crazy like me. So that's all I have to talk about tonight. For the Q&A, I'd actually like, if anyone knows other apps that are open source that you think are cool that I didn't talk about, I'd love to hear about that, or other ROMs, or even other operating systems. So yeah, thank you.
I'm 3 months into using a smartphone, and I know practically nothing. So would you go back to the beginning and say whether to do what you're doing, I have to rip all the guts out and throw them away and replace them, or can I go and find just one app and say, okay, play it?
I think you can just find one app.
Okay.
There, even in the Google Play Store, many of these apps are actually in there as well. I'm not sure if they all are, but OpenStreetMap, the Maps app I showed, that's in the Play Store. So if you wanted to try out that particular app, it would be. Are you using Android?
Yes.
Okay. It'll be in the Google Play Store. K9 Mail is also in there. A lot of these apps I actually had been using before I went crazy, so some of them I already knew and is already familiar with, and some of them I discovered as a result of not having the Play Store available anymore. So yeah, I think just find one app that you're using and go open source, one step at a time. You can also install F-Droid, the app store that I use. You can install that side by side with the Play Store, but sometimes it doesn't work so well. So that's asterisk there.
Can you inactivate one and then reactivate and switch back and forth?
The App Store? Or the
Between
app?
F-Droid and Play Store.
I think you can disable apps in Android, but I doubt you can disable the Play Store.
You can disable the Play Store.
You can? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Perhaps so.
When you installed the Firefox OS, how challenging was that? And then how were the options as far as, I know all their stuff is written in HTML5, so it's like,
Yeah.
it's all HTML, all the apps.
Yeah.
How were the options in there?
Well, to answer your first question, I would say it was very challenging. I actually Git cloned their repo and built it from source. I had to figure out their build system. Their stuff is super developer oriented right now, and not very user oriented. To the point that when you install Firefox OS, it has all these apps called like Test App 1, Test App 2, Test App 3. It definitely looks like just all test data. So it definitely has the feeling of very early in the process, and yeah, it's quite challenging. Once you build it, and it takes a long time to build. Once you're done building, you'll have a flashable, the ROM basically is just a binary file, and you actually use Google's ADB and Fastboot tools to load that on the phone, just like you would with Android. So if you're familiar with building and side-loading ROMs, getting it onto the phone is not too bad. Once you're using the phone, it's actually not too bad. It's a touch interface with lots of weird test apps that you don't know what they do. It also does have the ability to install apps, and as you said, the thing that's really nice about it is it's simple. It's just JavaScript, CSS, HTML. So I think writing apps for it was probably much easier than writing apps for Android. But also it seems to run a little slower than Android, probably because it's JavaScript and so forth.
Since you mentioned the ADB apps and development toolchain, Replicant, in addition to the Android part, also has a deproprietarized toolchain.
Oh, wow.
Which is actually the part that I'd use because I wasn't smart when I bought my phone, so there was no way it was going to work with that.
Yeah.
But that was nice.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't know that. That's cool.
Have you noticed a difference in what carriers work better with open source phones?
I've only used one carrier this whole time. I use T-Mobile. So my phone's just an Nexus 5 and it's just SIM. I do know one thing when it comes to carriers, that there's one carrier in particular that I think is very evil, and that's Verizon. And they're not just evil from the way they treat people in effect. They're a CDMA carrier, right? And actually the phone I have, this Nexus 5, has this phone has a GSM and a CDMA radio in it. It will work on any carrier in the whole world except Verizon. and I can tell you why. Verizon has closed source bits that they require you to have on your device that no one knows what they do, but you cannot join their network. Even though this can do CDMA, they cannot join their network without this closed source software. And they actually there's no way to use this phone with them. So I can go to Sprint, AT&T, or T-Mobile, but not them. So.
I think they changed that.
Oh, really?
Well, this is a universal phone. And when I went to them, they typed in the neon whatever number, and it said, I don't know that, and he's forced it.
Interesting.
Forced it. So it says unknown, not Verizon phone or something like that.
Unknown phone.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
It's a Nexus.
Interesting.
This is the plus one.
It's a Nexus. Oh, that's yours. But they forced it. They were able to force it. Now, the funny thing is I bought this in Google. I went searching on the web before I did it to see if you could do it. And they said, yes, you could do it. Because if you bought it from Motorola didn't give the numbers to Verizon. They said that Google would give them, but this guy said he couldn't find it in the system. But he still was able to do it.
That's very interesting. I'll have to.
Maybe because Google sells this.
Okay.
They still didn't recognize the number. But this doesn't have all that junk that Verizon lives on.
Yeah, and that's another benefit of going open source phone is all these weird apps you can't delete that phones come with these days. Yeah. Remind you of Internet Explorer toolbars. So when you go with when you flash CyanogenMod on your phone, it actually has very few apps. So I like that. It's nice.
Following up on that, can you trust CyanogenMod? Can you build it yourself?
Yes. Well, yes to the second question. I can't answer whether you can trust CyanogenMod. So I thought a lot about this question actually. You can build it yourself. It takes a few epics to download the source code. It's seriously when the git clone is ridiculous. I think it took 12 or 13 hours just to clone on my 15 megabit connection. So it's a lot of code, and who has read all that code? Probably only Google employees. And that is concerning. Well, there is a lot of binary data in there too. When you clone it, it's got all the drivers for all the phones they support, and they support a whole lot of phones. I don't know the number, but I bet it's over 100. So you're getting all this binary data in there that you don't know what it is, and it is a little bit concerning, right? Like I mentioned, that's why I had the asterisk on my title slide. It's am I really all that open source? Well, kind of. I'm being as open source as I know how to be. As for whether you can trust CyanogenMod themselves, that's a complicated question. I think about this when I use my computer operating system too. This is Fedora, and when I use Fedora, I'm implicitly trusting all the Fedora people. And at home I use Gentoo. When Gentoo is at least building from source, but did my compiler get attacked and now I'm compromised? I don't know. So I think trust is a complicated question to answer. And I think I struggle with this a lot. And I came to realize that eventually you just have to choose to trust somebody. Or not use a button.
Yeah, but CyanogenMod, you pull the binary down from some post on the forum.
Oh, I wouldn't do that.
There's like an actual website that you can go to where they self-host.
Yeah.
And they have MD5s on an HTTPS site so you can verify the signature.
I would not recommend going to forums and downloading people's ROMs. And that's actually, it's surprising how many people do that. And actually, another thing to point is that CyanogenMod is actually a company now. So I don't know if that actually makes them legit because so is Google, but they're not quite as sketchy as forums are.
Microsoft?
What?
Microsoft bought them a couple months ago, right?
They gave them a big donation, I think.
That was April Fool's.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was like April. It was on XDA.
Is that right?
Yeah, that was like.
Satire sites making plausible stories.
Yeah, I think that was April Fool's.
It's the onion.
Huh. I'll have to look into that.
For open source apps, AntennaPod, it's a open source podcast player.
Oh, cool.
For any podcast addicts in here.
Yeah.
In fact, it's pretty decent. It's not the main one I use, but it comes in handy.
Cool. I'll mention also that the media apps I mentioned, DSub and Subsonic, they also can do podcasts. I'm not a big podcaster, so I didn't mention that, but I should have mentioned that.
So you should mention the video player.
Oh, I just use the built-in.
VLC is available for Android.
Oh yeah, cool.
And it'll play just about anything. There's actually a nice, well, a relatively simple UTMP/ELNA browser for Android called. Let me look it up in a minute and say it. But then you can run the DLNA on a server and stream movies off of a home server.
Mm-hmm.
I've got that set up in my car so that my children can watch movies on road trips.
Nice.
Off a little Wi-Fi, also running Linux. It's all open source.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think CyanogenMod, I think they did. Didn't they? When they went corporate though, didn't they fork and they're only selling in certain places like this customized?
There's the Cyanogen, the proprietary one. It's the CyanogenMod.
Yeah.
So the two are still separate.
Okay.
So the stuff that Cyanogen makes for Cyanogen to ROM is different from CyanogenMod, which is but I believe it's still based on CyanogenMod.
And they actually had a product phone made by Oppo that was not sold in this market to my knowledge, but I think it was sold in Asia.
Yeah, India, I think,
So I wanted to ask you what you use KD Connect for and how useful do you find it?
What do I use it for? I mostly just getting the notifications. That's my main use.
What kind of notifications?
Any Android notification, like that you'd see in the top bar, just shows up and will notify it. I think that's useful. Mostly because I can't convince some people to stop texting me when I'd rather them use email or something. So, because I don't actually. The thing that's funny is, as much as I talk about this stuff, I actually don't like using my phone very much. Not because I don't like this software, but I prefer to when I'm at home, I put my phone, I charge it, and I leave. I don't carry it around the house with me, so I'm oftentimes away from my phone, and I like that. I like that out because I know when I get a text message.
Because you're sitting in front of your computer.
Yeah. And another thing I forgot to mention one app. There's an app called SMS Backup that started crashing. I used to really like it. I don't know what's wrong with it, but and that's why I didn't mention it here. But it's a cool app. Anytime you get an SMS, it can stick it into an IMAP folder for you and mark it as unread. And I really liked this, and I don't know what's wrong, but if I open the app, it crashes me. So I don't know what happened
You mentioned using OwnCloud quite a bit. Were there any other options you were looking at, or was OwnCloud pretty much it?
I didn't try other options. I did read about other options, and I don't even remember what they were. The thing that sold me on OwnCloud was that I'm kind of lazy, and I liked that I could deploy one thing instead of several things. It has a lot in one thing, because it does the file syncing and CalDAV and CardDAV and news, and it can actually be your Firefox profile. It can emulate that as well, and it has a whole bunch of other plugins. So for me, that was sort of what sold it, is that I can deploy one app and worry one time about someone hacking me instead of deploying a server for each of those.
So you mentioned the Mozilla profile. Are you talking about the Mozilla Sync replacement?
Mm-hmm.
Did they actually, I know at one point they supported the previous version, but not the newest version. Has that changed?
No, you're right, and there is a trick you can do to continue using the old version.
Fake it into thinking you're still on the old profile.
Yeah, that's what you have to do for now. The cool thing though is if you don't want to do that, you can actually still run Firefox. Firefox's sync is still open source, so you can still just run there yourself.
Just a quick app shout out. If you like IRC a lot, Wassel is really cool.
Build it.
QUASSEL. What I like. So if you're familiar with the idea of the bouncer, what it is, you have a core which runs on a server, like probably the same one you're running OwnCloud on. Your phone connects to that, and then the server connects to all the IRC networks. So when your phone isn't connected because your internet's out or whatever, you're still in all the IRC chat rooms, and you'll still get all the messages when you come back. And you can also connect to it from your desktop too.
Yeah, there's a WeChat app actually in Android, in F-Droid, that does something similar, but it has something about it that's just terrible, which is why I don't use it. But it can actually connect to your running WeChat. So if you use WeChat in the terminal, it actually has an API, and you can connect your phone to your client, which is really strange. But the thing that's terrible is that it doesn't check SSL certificate signatures, which is so boneheaded. So I don't use it for that reason, but hopefully they'll fix that.
Are you familiar with the Motorola A780 or the Moco?
I'm not.
No? They were the Linux phone Motorola did like 10 years ago, and then Moco was the moving phone. Exactly that was a long time ago. Long before the iPhone.
Have you used them?
A lot of developers from OpenWRT went on and worked on Moco, and the guy that did net filters, he was one of the lead developers at Moco. And also, we considered just getting a phone module from like SparkFun and then putting some kind of PDA-like device, a Raspberry Pi with a screen or something like that as a front end, so you actually had a complete system that you controlled and then you just interface to the network.
Oh, just to get the network?
Those modules, those don't even do edge speeds. I forget what the next tier down is, but we like dial-up speeds, go for it. But it doesn't do any of the newer LTE or any of the high-speed stuff.
Yeah.
So it's mostly one I'm interested in.
Good suggestions.
So that's you said it's open source hardware.
Bill, you.
The OwnCloud client, talking about syncing files, can you tune it so it only syncs certain files over data versus Wi-Fi versus when you're plugged in charging?
So file by file?
So if I take a video, a 5-minute video, I don't want my data connection
of course, yeah,
being sucked down with that. And I also don't want my Wi-Fi connection being sucked down until I plug it into charge.
I'm not sure that you can tell it to look at the kind of connection you have, but what it does do by default is it syncs nothing. So if you're used to OwnCloud's desktop client, it actually syncs everything all the time. So anything you put in gets synced, and you can add exceptions for what you don't want synced. The Android client is the opposite. It accepts everything by default, and you have to tell it what you want to sync, and probably for this reason. And so when you click on something, it downloads it, but it doesn't continue syncing it. It has a long press option to track that file. So you can opt in to syncing all the time, However, I suspect that it won't matter if you're on Wi-Fi or not. So that's probably a limitation. It's worth pointing out though that that's just what's it called? It's just WebDAV. So there are other WebDAV. David, you said you use a different WebDAV client.
There's a closed source one that I use. I'm sorry to say. It has more features. It's called Folder Sync. It's on the Android Play Store.
Cool.
And it can run on a schedule, and you can choose what you want to sync. And,
Yeah.
it hooks into Tasker and all that stuff. If you care about those things.
Yeah.
I wish it was open source. I really
Yeah, sure. Well, so anyway, the point is that it's just DAV, WebDAV. So if you can find any WebDAV client, you don't have to use that one. And OwnCloud itself is just doing WebDAV.
So I've never tried to install an operating system on a phone. I've never noticed an F2 key prompted. What's the mechanics of this?
Yes. Okay, so when I was planning this talk, I was considering, should I talk about that? And then I realized that talking about that would be crazy. And this is why. It really depends on your phone. Every phone has lots of gotchas. Some phones are impossible to do this with. A lot of the phone manufacturers have gone out of their way to lock down the phone where it is checking for signatures on the ROM and it will reject anything not signed by the manufacturer. And I really hate that. I mean, if you buy a phone, it should be your right to load your own stuff on it, just like I can put my own operating system on my computer. And unfortunately, that's not the philosophy that they share with me. So it really depends on your device. I can tell you what I do for my device. With this phone, I can push both volume buttons. When it's off, I push both volume buttons and the power button, and I hold them, and it pulls up in this special menu. While in that menu, I can plug it into my computer with USB, and there's a program called FastBoot that Google provides, and it has a command called FastBoot OEM Unlock. You do it in the shell. And it basically tells the phone that everything's cool, don't worry. And the phone goes into a special mode. And at this point, I can then basically use, over USB, I can type another command to push the ROM I want onto the phone, and then the phone loads it. So it's pretty straightforward with this phone, and well documented too. Unfortunately, not all phones are that easy. Some of them you have to find an exploit to get it to work. I used to have the Motorola Droid, and there was an exploit to gain root. And then once you had root, you could do something, I don't even remember the details, but there's actually a bash and kernel exploit you were taking advantage of to become root. And then after being root, you could do a lot of things. Kevin, you had a question?
I was just going to point out that the CyanogenLog wiki has pretty decent documentation for each of the individual models. So if you know your model, it will tell you whether it's even possible and adhering to these steps.
That's true.
And along those lines, should I double mention, the phone that I have is HTC Evo 4G LTE. A couple more letters on there, I'm sure.
TMs and Rs and circles.
They've got it locked down, straight from the factory. But if you go to their website, you can download basically what amounts to their own exploit, their own unlock. And about the only difference is that they no longer, of course, warranty or anything like that. And when it boots up, it explicitly says that this is debug, it's like a demo evaluation ROM, and then at that point you can put whatever you want on it.
Yep.
But they explicitly disavow all knowledge of you, and at that point you're on your own.
I think that's true for my phone as well. Mine shows this picture of an unlocked lock icon when it's booting to indicate that I've done something bad to it, I guess.
My favorite thing about that, by the way, is that they've got the little legalese underneath it that says the use of this is you have to have it authorized in writing. I got it from them. They made me jump through a couple of hoops to get it. But at no point was there any writing involved.
Yeah.
But that's, they handed it to me and said, run it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's probably just to protect them.
I'm sure at some point, it's like the mattress tag, don't remove it.
Yeah, or you'll go to prison.
I would remove myself, my property.
The tag is only from the real life.
One disadvantage of that HTC developer mode versus SOS is that it's harder to flash bootloaders and radio primers.
Mine's actually that plus SOS.
Okay, well, yeah, if you get an SOS too, it's just like having an unlock access and flash anything you want anytime you want.
Okay, so I thought of something that I might want to with a phone to add one. I've noticed in F-Droid there's the Norwegian transit times, but there's like the local transit times aren't in Android.
Mhm.
So I guess it's because no one's written that app yet. I don't know why the local transit systems don't release their app.
Yeah, look at your Matthew's got a good
But
answer for us.
perhaps that's something we as a community can do so that like their app.
The answer is because TriLUG wants to make money. We didn't write the app.
How do
TriLUG
you
did.
get money to get on the bus?
Well,
That's we can track.
no, see, like, yeah, TriLUG writes the app. We had nothing to do with writing the app. Like, we just send our APL data to TriLUG and they do all the thing. But TriLUG does have an API that you could use to write your own open source TriLUG client if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And if you want to, I would be totally for that because I'm not a very big fan of their current Android app.
Yeah.
As a personal person, not as a Go Triangle employee.
Yeah. And also, you could use OpenStreetMap as your base.
Yeah.
I'll also point out something I didn't say actually.
No, but TriLUG relays that data to anyone. Like you don't. The only rule. Shut up. The only restriction on using the TriLUG API is it has to be like non-commercial. You're implementing
software client for it. It's impossible because they're using strict.
Well, but can we get the ADR data from Triangle Transit instead of
Probably
getting it from
not.
TransLog?
We have to get that from our vendor and pass it through to TriLUG. But the fact that the TriLUG API forbids commercial usage shouldn't forbid you from writing an open source app. It just means that you
It's just free software should be dependent on non-free usage.
Well, yeah.
Motion to move this to TriLUG.
Seconded.
I do want to point out one other thing that's nice in situations like this, because I actually ride the bus a whole lot. One thing that's important not to forget is that you don't have to have an app for everything. You know, the phrase, there's an app for that. Why is there an app for that? I don't understand why there's so many apps, because so many things already have a nice web interface. I still write tweets and I don't use the Twitter app. I just go in the web browser and I write tweets. And this way I'm also sandboxing Twitter. Like Twitter can't see my contacts that way. I mean, CyanogenMod can block it anyway, but you know, I'm not even risking that from happening. Only what I type into my web browser can they find out. And TriLUG's, TTA's website works really well on Android with Firefox, and that's how I can tell when the bus is coming. So that's what I do. I use the web browser a whole lot more than I used to.
So one of the common things that you hear Linux touted as is it's a great way to revive old hardware. You can throw Linux on that 10-year-old laptop and it actually runs.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll start seeing that in mobile? Do you think we'll start seeing some of these guys writing or porting newer OSs, maybe stripping some of the features out? Says the guy who's still rocking the Nexus 1 with the baby driver.
I think so. So another thing I didn't mention that I should have, because I forgot about it when I was making my slides, is I saw some nice improvements in my phone's performance when I went this way. When you run Google software on your phone, there's a whole lot of things going on in the background. You know, they're constantly telling the NSA where you are and what you're typing on your keyboard. And so when you don't have those processes using up your battery and your processor that way, you'll see better battery life, and you'll see you'll feel
I mean, you know, in terms of the battery life, yeah, it's probably as good, if not better, than when I first got it. And it's 4 years old.
Yeah.
The biggest problem is, you know, I'm running CyanogenMod, it works great. They only support up through Android 2.3.
That's right. Yes.
Android 4, I guess they put too many new features or something and it won't even fit on here.
Yeah. So I think that replicant project that Jack also mentioned might be interesting for this regard because they're trying to make the pure open source phone. That might be sort of the community you're referring to of people that want to have a bunch of old phones and they just want to hack on them. So this is sort of a crystal ball question, and I don't know the future, but I think probably. I mean, I feel like I said, I feel like phones are where PCs were in the 90s or something, and you know, who knows what the future is, but I think that's definitely a possible future.
Going on what you were saying earlier, there's a very nice talk by one of the founders of CyanogenMod. It was raised a couple years back. It's on YouTube. It's like 40 minutes long-ish, but it illustrates exactly what the project has to do to port a phone, to port software to the phone, and the steps involved are incredibly complex, including weird things like, for example, tricking the camera app or the camera driver into thinking that you have the original ROM and version that you had when you bought the phone, and that this is even something that the OEMs have to do.
Oh, weird.
I don't know if that's changed. It was released a couple of years ago. It gives a lot of insight into exactly how difficult it is to port everything.
So we need a truly open phone, Danny.
Yeah, open hardware is important for this.
I actually have a couple of comments. First, the thing that killed Android 4 for the Nexus 1 was the fact that the Adreno 200 GPU in that phone just isn't very good at rendering hardware acceleration in Android 4 because I had a Bird Incredible that had the same chipset. And the other thing is, you said you had Nexus 5, right?
Yeah.
You may have been running into a battery bug that I've been complaining to Google about for months and months now, where the GPS seems to get stuck on. If you turn it on, even if the system keeps it off, it still stays on and drains the battery. And the Google location services really exacerbate that problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and I saw an incredible improvement.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. It drains 10% battery an hour. That's not acceptable.
Yeah, that's a lot.
You mentioned typing. You mentioned Google knowing everything you're typing. I just wanted to say, be careful with external keyboards like SwiftKey. I know one of the engineers that works on the Hadoop cluster mining that data.
Wow. That was mostly a joke when I said
Twitter only knows what you type in Twitter. They know what you type in everything.
Yeah.
As far as what you said earlier about using the web client for something, Android has a nice little feature depending on what browser you're in, and you can add a link to the website you're onto your launcher, just like it's a regular app, and it just opens up the web page without all the extra rendering of the browser.
Oh, that's a good app. That's cool. I haven't thought about that.
So, you can have a Twitter app on the phone, though. It's just a website without all that.
It's pretty much the same, though. It looks just like the Twitter app, except it's not spying on you. Well, it's still spying on you, but you're limiting how much it's spying on you.
If outside of Android, is there, I guess, what are some of the ways you kind of discover some of the open source, other open source applications that are out there? I mean, is that just kind of the only ecosystem that's out there right now?
It's the only one I know of. I would hesitate to say it's the only one. But it is the only one I'm personally aware of. As far as discovering apps, it has a search feature that's pretty good. Like they tag the apps. Sometimes it's funny when you search for something because it'll pull up ones that you'll wonder how in the world that was related to what you searched for. Because I think it's like really aggressive about searching the full body of text description in there, and sometimes you get surprising results. But another thing that's pretty cool to do is just hop into #F-Droid on Freenode, and you can just say, hey, I want to solve this problem. What are there apps for that? And you might find that there is one, or you might even find someone in F-Droid that's working on it right now that you might be able to get involved with. So, and they're a really cool community. I really like talking to those guys and ladies.
So I use Titanium Backup, but I don't believe it is open source. Is there an open source backup restore system?
Not that I know of. And actually, I used to use that one as well. So my solution for this is that I don't back up my phone. However, it's mitigated by the fact that I have OwnCloud backing up my photos for me, because photos is one of the main sources of data I create with my phone. And I like those to be backed up. And those get backed up immediately. They just get shoved into OwnCloud and archived. As for the other data, everything else that I do is already in the cloud, as they say. So, my email, well, that's already on my, it's going to be in my Dovecot server. My chat is going to be in Jabber. My, sort of like all those pieces I use are all kind of relying on that server to hold the data. So if my phone got completely wiped, the most disappointing part would be that I would have to reconfigure it. And to my knowledge, there's nobody who's Ansible to provision the phone. But that would be really great if there was.
The Android ADB tools provided by Google do have a backup. It's very similar to Titanium Backup. And it gets the apps and makes an APK and has the data apps too.
I've just never been able to get that to work. It just seems really buggy.
It is buggy, you're right. I've had trouble with it, but it might be preferable to Titanium Backup if you trust the Google tools more than Titanium Backup.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, both O and backup actually seems to work. Yeah, so you just have to run it on the old one, and then it dumps all your APKs and all the SQL databases. It worked at least for restoring most things. A couple of apps I was like, yeah, your settings are gone.
Well, you know,
the main thing was to copy everything I had over and say, all right, my contacts at least.
yeah. When I used to use Titanium Backup, I had similar problems though. Like oh, your SMSs, sorry, those are gone. And actually, right now, as I mentioned, I had been using an app that put SMSs into IMAP for me, which is very nice. Once that broke, I'm actually not backing up those right now, so that's unfortunate. I don't put a lot of important data in text messages.
So actually, a problem I had when I reflashed my phone was that I couldn't get it back on the cell network. And a lot of the help online depended on some sort of proprietary add-on to the calling app or some other just proprietary app that's on the original ROM. And then I found some other directions. I thought, oh, this will work. And I had to enter like the access point names and all the data. But whatever version of CyanogenMod I had, that was buggy, so I couldn't actually save all that data I was entering. I just enter it, and then it would disappear, and I enter it, and it would disappear.
Oh, man.
So that was sort of frustrating, but it was also, I really, being a PC user, really wanted to just go and edit some files. And instead of using the app to do it, just insert it that way. But
yeah.
I'm not sure if anyone else has had experiences, but.
And if you've ever gotten a shell on an Android phone, it's the most enraging shell ever. Because it seems like you're in Linux, but you're not really in Linux. And it's like so close, but so different. The tar doesn't have the same flags that you know and love. Like and there's no man pages. So
yeah, I also was having fights with the file manager because what I see in the shell would be different than what I see in the file browser.
Yeah. It's worth pointing out that with ADB you can actually get a shell on the phone and you can actually use your real keyboard on your computer.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah, so you can, you plug your phone in with your USB and you can type, basically, it's similar to SSHing on the phone except you're actually doing it with USB. And so you can actually use a real keyboard and not a tiny keyboard and do real stuff, but you are in a really messed up environment the whole time, so that's kind of enraging. Cool, well, thanks for coming and hearing me babble.
Thanks, Randy.